It was supposed to be another ordinary Sunday service at Family Worship Center in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, but what unfolded that morning has now become one of the most talked about moments in the history of the Swaggart family. Gabriel Swaggart, the grandson of Jimmy Swaggart, and the man many consider the heir to the Pentecostal empire, stood before the congregation with trembling hands and a heavy heart. But instead of preaching his usual fiery sermon about salvation, prophecy, or faith, he turned his words towards someone who has long stood in his shadow, his wife, Jill, and the things he said about her left everyone absolutely speechless. For years, Jill Swaggart has been a familiar face to those who follow the ministry. With her graceful presence in the choir, her radiant smile, and her steady voice in worship, she has embodied what many consider the image of a supportive Christian wife. Yet those who know the pressures of ministry life also know that being married to a Swaggart is no easy task. Every move is scrutinized, every smile is questioned, and every silence is interpreted as hiding something deeper. That morning, Gabriel peeled back the curtain on a reality few had ever imagined. As the cameras zoomed in on his face, his voice broke and he declared, "There's something I need to say today, not about the church, not about the ministry, but about my wife, Jill." And some of you may not be ready for this. A hush fell over the sanctuary. People leaned forward in their seats, sensing that this was not going to be business as usual. Jill herself looked surprised, her eyes fixed on her husband, unsure of what he would say next. Then Gabriel began confessing in a way that no Swaggart had ever done publicly. He admitted that for years he had allowed the weight of ministry, the expectations of the Swaggart name, and his own pride to come between him and the woman who had given up everything to stand beside him. "There were nights," he said, "when I chose ministry over her. There were moments when I silenced her voice because I thought mine was more important. There were times I let this family's legacy crush her spirit, and for that, Jill, I am sorry. You are the reason I can even stand here today." The congregation gasped. Some began to clap, others whispered to one another. But before anyone could react fully, Gabriel dropped an even bigger bombshell. He revealed that years ago, when he was struggling in silence with personal battles that could have destroyed him, Jill was the one who carried him through. With tears streaming down his face, he said, "She could have left me, she could have exposed me, she could have destroyed everything, but instead, she chose to stay. She chose to protect me. She chose to love me when I didn't even love myself, and without her, there would be no ministry, no family, no Gabriel Swaggart." Those words hit like a lightning bolt. What exactly had Jill protected him from? What secrets had she carried all these years? In that moment, the world realized that Jill wasn't just a quiet figure. In the background, she was the one holding the entire foundation together. People in the audience cried openly. Jill covered her face with her hands as tears rolled down her cheeks. Social media exploded within minutes. Clips of Gabriel's words going viral across YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok. Some praised Gabriel for finally being honest, calling it a rare moment of humility from a family known for projecting strength. Others speculated wildly, convinced that Gabriel had just hinted at a scandal still hidden from the public eye. The comments section filled with questions. Was Gabriel struggling with addiction? Was there infidelity? Was Jill covering up something much darker in order to protect the ministry's image? The more people watched, the more mysterious it all became. But the story did not end there. What made it even more explosive was the Swaggart family's reaction, or rather, their lack of reaction. Jimmy Swaggart, now in his late 80s, said nothing. Frances, known for her fiery nature, also remained silent. Donnie Swaggart, Gabriel's father, released a vague statement about supporting family, but never once mentioned Jill's name. Their silence only added fuel to the fire. Why would the family not celebrate Gabriel's emotional tribute? Unless, of course, they knew his words were about more than just appreciation. Unless they knew Jill had indeed carried secrets powerful enough to alter the future of the ministry. In the days that followed, Jill herself became the center of attention. For years, she had been the quiet strength behind her husband, but now the world wanted to hear from her. What did she think about Gabriel's confession? Did she feel burdened by the role she had been forced into? Was she hiding her own struggles under the pressure of maintaining the perfect image of a Swaggart wife? Those who had worked closely with Jill in the choir whispered that she often appeared exhausted, carrying not just her own weight but the emotional burdens of her husband. Some recalled moments when she seemed ready to break but pushed forward for the sake of appearances. The more people dug into Jill's life, the more they saw the human being behind the polished image. A woman who had once been just Jill Richards, a simple Christian girl, was now carrying the name of one of the most controversial religious dynasties in America. And now, thanks to Gabriel's confession, the world knew that behind that smile lay a story of sacrifice, silence, and strength. Gabriel's words had made Jill the hero of his story, but they also raised more questions than they answered. What exactly had happened in the past? What was the hidden struggle Jill had protected him from? And why did Gabriel choose that moment to confess publicly? Some insiders suggested that Gabriel's speech was a way of getting ahead of potential revelations, a strategy to present himself as humble before any damaging stories emerged. Others believed it was a genuine act of repentance, a husband finally acknowledging what his wife had endured. Whatever the truth, one thing was clear: Jill was no longer just the pastor's wife sitting quietly in the choir. She was the woman who had saved Gabriel's life, his ministry, and possibly the entire Swaggart legacy. The moment left everyone speechless, but it also left them hungry for answers. And perhaps that was Gabriel's intention all along, to shine a light on the woman who had carried him, while still keeping the deepest details of his struggle shrouded in mystery. In doing so, he not only honored Jill, but also set off a storm of speculation that will continue to follow them for years. Whether seen as a heartfelt confession or a strategic move, Gabriel's words changed the way the world sees Jill Swaggart forever. She is no longer the background figure. She is the silent warrior whose presence has defined the future of one of the most famous families in American Christianity. And in the end, that may be why Gabriel's words hit so hard. Because in a world where the Swaggarts are known for their power, their preaching, and their scandals, the quiet truth was revealed. The true strength of the empire lies not in the pulpit, not in the cameras, but in the heart of a woman who chose to stay when she had every reason to walk away. The days after Gabriel's shocking confession turned into weeks of endless speculation. People could not stop talking about Jill. For the first time, she was no longer just the smiling face on the stage. She was the center of a mystery, the quiet keeper of secrets that even the boldest preachers had never dared to admit. Social media threads were flooded with her pictures, her voice in worship clips, and endless questions about what she had endured. In Baton Rouge, where the Swaggart name carried both reverence and controversy, whispers grew louder. What did Jill know? What had she protected Gabriel from? And why did Gabriel feel the need to say all of this now, after years of silence? Jill herself did not speak publicly. She continued her role in the choir, her face calm, her voice steady, as if nothing had changed. But those who looked closely noticed a difference. There was a heaviness in her eyes, a deep well of emotion that her smile couldn't hide. People who sat near her said they saw her wipe tears during worship more often than before. Some wondered if Gabriel's confession had lifted a weight from her shoulders, while others feared it had only made her burden heavier by placing her directly in the spotlight. Behind the scenes, insiders claimed that the Swaggart family was divided. Frances, the matriarch, was furious. She reportedly told close associates that Gabriel had made the family look weak by airing personal matters publicly. Donnie was caught between his loyalty to his son and his allegiance to his mother, choosing silence as his safest option. Jimmy, frail and quiet in his later years, is said to have simply shaken his head and muttered that some things are better left unsaid. But Jill, whether by choice or circumstance, had no platform to defend herself. Her silence became both her shield and her prison. Meanwhile, Gabriel's words were dissected endlessly by media outlets and religious commentators. Christian talk shows debated whether his speech was an act of bravery or a desperate attempt to cover up something darker. Secular outlets treated it as yet another episode in the long-running soap opera that was the Swaggart family saga. And through it all, Jill's name was repeated again and again, tied to questions she never asked to be a part of. For the faithful members of Family Worship Center, the impact was even more personal. Some felt inspired, believing Gabriel's openness was a sign of true humility and a reminder that even pastors face struggles. Others, however, felt betrayed, unsettled by the idea that their leader had been hiding something serious all along. They looked at Jill differently now, not just as the pastor's wife, but as the woman who had carried secrets that might have reshaped their entire view of the ministry if revealed. Whispers emerged about Jill's sacrifices. Some recalled times when she had skipped personal commitments to stand beside Gabriel during ministry crises. Others remembered how she once disappeared from the public eye for weeks, and speculation now swirled that she had taken that time to shield Gabriel from something the public was never meant to see. Every piece of her life was now re-examined under the harsh light of suspicion and curiosity. But what made the entire situation explosive was the timing. The ministry had been preparing for a new phase, with Gabriel increasingly stepping into his grandfather's role as the leader of Sun Life Broadcasting Network and Family Worship Center. His confession, intentional or not, painted Jill as the unsung savior of the ministry. Some insiders claim this angered certain family members who feared Jill was being positioned as too important, her influence too visible, her role too celebrated. The Swaggart empire had always been about the pulpit, about the preacher with the microphone, not about the quiet figure in the choir. And now, because of Gabriel's words, Jill's quiet presence threatened to overshadow the fiery preaching. Among ordinary believers, reactions remained deeply divided. Some women praised Jill as an example of a godly wife who stood by her husband in his darkest hours. Others criticized the expectation placed on her, arguing that no woman should have to silently carry such burdens just to preserve a man's image or ministry. Men in the congregation expressed both admiration and discomfort. Admiration for Gabriel's honesty, and discomfort at the thought that their pastor had once been on the verge of losing everything. And then came the rumors. Rumors that Jill had not just protected Gabriel, but had confronted the family itself in private battles. Rumors that she had begged him to step back from the spotlight to save their marriage, but he refused because of pressure from Francis and Donnie. Rumors that Gabriel's personal struggles, though never named, were so serious that, without Jill's intervention, the entire ministry could have collapsed years ago. None of this was confirmed, of course, but in the absence of answers, speculation became truth for many. As more weeks passed, the story began to take on a life of its own. People who had once ignored Jill now followed her every move, her every song, her every expression during church broadcasts. When she smiled, viewers asked if it was genuine or forced. When she sang with tears in her eyes, they wondered what pain lay behind them. Jill, in many ways, became a mirror onto which people projected their own beliefs about love, loyalty, suffering, and silence. Through it all, Gabriel seemed both relieved and burdened. Relieved that he had finally honored his wife publicly, but burdened by the storm it created. His sermons returned to their usual themes, but every time he mentioned family, marriage, or loyalty, the congregation perked up, waiting for another hint, another